Future Hacker, Life, Path, Future.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the second episode of the interview with Peter Kronstrøm, the head of Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies for Latin America. In our first episode, we talked a lot about how to create the alternative futures and how the future studies are all based on creativity and thinking outside the box, thinking the unthinkable, and how the future is unlimited. So those are some phrases that Peter talked to us about. Super interesting. Peter, thank you so much for staying here with us. So let's move forward. Investing on the long-term and uncertain future has always been a challenge to most companies, right? So it's all about investment at the end. On the same time, we've seen with history, all those big companies that are dying along the time because of their lack of vision or their lack of will for change. One small example would be the classic case of Blockbuster and Netflix. So which would be your advice regarding the balance of investing on now and preparing for the future?
Well, of course, I'm a little bit biased in my answer because, of course, I think that, if you run any company, whatever company it is, even if it's just a small retail shop, any company at all, from the biggest companies on the planet to the smallest companies, if you don't have investment and some clear thoughts and some clear strategies on how to incorporate a long-term strategy, then we always make the analogy that it's like you're driving a truck blindfolded. So I think really it's not an either or. You won't have any future if you don't have any mechanism inside your company to deal with long-term strategy and have some kind of future vision. If you don't have this future vision, it is like actually driving a truck blindfolded. So you will be very high risk of being eliminated. You will be very high risk at having a huge accident. So it's really not either or, but it's really you need to do both. And of course, I'm biased, and I would say that you should even invest more on the future, because if we see many things, the most successful companies that are still around, they change their core business several times throughout their life. And really, so any company, any business, if they are not having the line of thought that probably or most likely in the future, our core business will be completely different from what it is today. If you don't have that vision, and if you don't have any idea about what those new core businesses could be, then I really think you're in a very bad place. And we always say that one of the raison d'etre, or one of the reasons that we're here at the Institute of Copenhagen, is greatly to help society avoid this unnecessary destruction of value. So our founder, Torkild Christensen, he was the Minister of Finance, and he always had at one of his core visions and one of his core value was that we are doing future studies in order to help society avoid unnecessary destruction of value. So if you don't have the long-term perspective, if you don't have the vision long-term what is happening to the world, then your risk of destroying value unnecessarily is really, really high. On the other hand, if you have a long-term vision and if you are aware of how the future can be molded and how the future is created in the present, you can both have a very, very fruitful positioning in the future, and you can also help change the course of our planet, help change the course of our society. And I think that is really, we need long-term vision in order to ensure our future value and the value of our future societies.
Yes, I like the term that you've been using, which is the destruction of value, right? And maybe this is something that it has to be related to the organization cultures and how our executives work are valued as well today, right? Which is being able to measure not only the short-term results, but also the long-term strategy. And this is an art at the end. What are your thoughts about that?
Completely. I think that my thoughts on that is that, you wouldn't need future studies if we lived in a stable, linear world. But everything indicates that we are not living in a stable, linear world. No, especially now looking at the pandemic. Our world is highly uncertain, and it's really difficult to make precise prediction of what's going to happen. So that's why future studies is such a key discipline in terms of long-term strategy. We are working a lot with a concept that I'm sure you guys know, and maybe also a lot of the viewers have heard about, wild cards or black swans. So this is really a key term in future studies. What is wild cards and black swans? It is events, non-linear, and that paradigm shift in their nature. And we say that at this point of history, we have never been living so many wild cards and black swans at the same time. So when we talk wild card and black swans, we are talking about events that are very, very difficult to foresee. And we're talking about events that have a high impact on our society. So, for instance, a rupture of a volcano in Iceland that paralyzes the airplane traffic over a vast place of the world. Unforeseen and changing everything. A rupture of an earthquake. Or, for instance, the smartphone or the arrival of internet. Events that were difficult to foresee, but that completely changed our society. So we're saying that right now we have never lived so many wild cards at the same time. This causes a lot of turbulence. This turbulence really is a call for robust strategies and resilience by our organizations. So we have to make societies that are resilient and robust by being agile and being flexible in terms of able to shift strategy very quickly and to adapt to a completely new scenario within a question of months. And that is another thing, I think, that the aftermath of the pandemic will be that we will see a lot of organizations and countries and societies will be much more resilient due to our experiences with the pandemic. So maybe I said recently in one of my online presentations that actually I think that the aftermath of the pandemic will have trained the world population and have trained our societies to have a much more fast response and to be much more able to deal with sudden changes and sudden changes that are really demanding. And also I think that the aftermath of the pandemic will be an economic plus side for our society. Even though we will face economic crisis because of this bloody pandemic, but I think the aftermath, if we look 10 years ahead, is that as pandemics, all pandemics have had a positive result on society. Because in the aftermath of the pandemics, we really do see a lot of innovation happening and a lot of creativity happening and a lot of new ways of doing things are happening. So when people are suddenly confined in their houses or we live in societies that are under quarantine, when everything we used to know in our day-to-day life is completely reversed or stopped or changed, great things are happening because it gives our society a natural pause and just the fact that we cannot take everything for granted. This is a huge, something that initiates and stimulates creativity and innovation. So I think that the aftermath of this pandemic will be as the others. We'll see a ton of new innovation, a ton of new ways of doing things, and that will be for the better of society. So maybe that is the Narnia of the pandemic, if I can say it like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when we're talking about creativity and innovation, we can't avoid talking about also the technology evolution. So let's talk a little bit about that. When we talk about technology evolution, we are nowadays hearing a lot of new terms like augmented future and blockchain and artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and all of that, right? You have all those trend subjects when it comes to technology. So let's talk a little about the artificial intelligence piece. So basically, the artificial intelligence, as at least we currently know it basically uses the past data to improve the forecasting capabilities, right? But it seems when you're talking about future studies, the past doesn't seem as relevant, and the focus is more on the unknown, as you mentioned, on creating possible different futures, right? How do you use those variables, and which variables do you consider if some of those may not even exist yet? Is there any creative algorithm, for example? And if there is, how does it actually work?
That is actually a fantastic question, and I think it pinpoints right to the core of one of the biggest dilemma and one of the most challenging things we face in our future. Because, of course, artificial intelligence is one of the most powerful tools we have right now. But what we are seeing is that there's a huge that's a huge threat in that our algorithms will replicate patterns that maybe has not been so fruitful. Here I'm talking about, for instance, racial and sexual discrimination. So there's a huge threat that artificial intelligence, if not controlled and if not designed smartly, will just reproduce racial bias, sexual bias, religious bias, and all these bias that we can say that our world consists of a lot of biases that is making life difficult for certain groups and discriminating. So I think it's a very big challenge right now. How do we ensure that all this artificial intelligence or machine learning that we are applying for great results, how do we assure that they will even also help us not just reproducing our old problems, but also help us? And we have seen some examples of people trying to make algorithms that can also not only predict, but also help us be surprised, or help us for making novel innovation. So I think mainly something we can program our way out of, and that is possible. But we need to have a focus on it. And one of the things that I'm very occupied in, living in Brazil and in Latin America, is Afrofuturism, and also female empowerment, and also Afro in terms of pushing for an agenda of more equality between the sexes. As I said before, what we see, the pandemic has actually accelerated a lot of futures. But unfortunately, the pandemic has also de-accelerated some futures. So for a long time, one of our mega trends is demographic development. And here we have seen the last 50 years, our world history is one where every time there is more equality between the man and the woman. Actually, unfortunately, we have seen in the pandemic a rise of 30% on feminicidio, or women that are being butchered. And that has been, murder on women has risen 30% during the pandemic. And this is really, really hard, mega concerning. So I think that really algorithms and artificial intelligence, machine learning, as we prefer to call it, is key for our future. But the way we program these algorithms is the tricky point. So we need to make sure we also leave space for novel things, as you say, as the future is being created by random things that are happening. So we need to make sure that we are actually controlling these algorithms, no? And it's also our viewpoint, more or less, our researchers that know more about technology, they're all saying that artificial intelligence and algorithms are not dangerous. It's like a knife. It's always the human behind that are using them. And that human can use it either to kill or to do good. So it is really, back again, machines aren't doing anything by themselves. There will always be human behind. And so we have the final control. And we need to make sure, of course, that we push for a more just world, and actually avoid just reproducing racial and sexual biases of the past.
Peter, it's just great that you brought this up, because basically we are talking about the speed of the technology evolution, right? Which is basically we are running at a speed of a geometric progression versus the speed of the human behavior evolution, which is in our arithmetic pace, basically, right? So there's so much that we still need to figure out, and it's very important to have an open discussion because a technology revolution implies in ethics, conversations, a discussion about human relations, all the legal boundaries that need to be defined. We had a past interview that we were talking about gene editing, right? So there's so much still to discuss, but the pace is very different. So we're just running with the technology evolution, and thanks to this pandemic, it's, as you mentioned, we are running way faster than we would, but still we have this gap of keeping up with the human evolution, the human behavior, right?
Yes, completely. I mean, we are seeing, and actually this is not only a gap with keeping up with the human behavior, because you can say we are still very close to the human beings that we were when we were living on the savannah and hunting for food, and our genetic material has hardly changed anything since then. And then we are living in this very technological based world where algorithms are helping us understand more and more of our universe. So sometimes we are so ahead of what maybe we are capable of understanding. These times of being humans is a miracle, and it's a great luxury in this moment that we are one of our mega trends that I really think is one of the most interesting is what we call knowledge society or knowledge explosion. Actually, I think our biggest task today is not to learn, but it is to unlearn. And I think that this is also something that communicates very beautifully with the pandemic moment, that we are learning that we really know so little and we still have so long to go. Because many times in the mass media, we get the impression that our society has reached like a plateau where we are so developed and nothing more can be developed. And we're like at a plateau where we are like almost knowing everything. But really, when you look at this megatrend knowledge explosion and our present moment, what we can only know is that all the things we knew 10 years ago, we now know we had to completely reformulate. For instance, in terms of healthcare, we are starting to understand that we don't even understand the human body. Now, like, for instance, all this research that is coming up that really has my attention on the microbiome, and that really there are living trillions of species in what appears to be our bodies is in fact a universe of trillions of different species living together, and only 1/3 of the cells that are in a human being is actually human. 2/3, and all this is vastly interesting and really also helping us reformulate. So I think what is the luxury of this moment is that if more and more people could realize that we really know very little and we have so much to go, this opens up for the future to actually be to look at the future more of an ocean of opportunities that are undiscovered and are there for us to discover. And this also helps us maybe. Another key thing to working with the future is questioning the present. Can we really be sure that what we know today is really true? Well, we know that 10 years ago, the recommendation was not to eat fat and avoid fat and eat a lot of grains. And the new dietary science that is coming out is actually the reversed, is to avoid grains and eat lots of fat. I mean, so I think that is the fascinating about being alive in this moment, that the knowledge production is going so fast. So more and more people are realizing, my God, we need to actually question it all. Because I think the only thing we can be really sure about is that 10 years from now, we will be laughing at all the things we believe today. And I think that's a fascinating thought.
Peter, thank you so much. There was a lot of great insights, such a great conversation with you, a lot of insights and very inspiring. Once again, thank you so much for being with us. So unfortunately, we are going to end this interview, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, about the studies, about the Institute, please feel free. And I'm going to say goodbye for our listeners. So Peter, the word is yours right now. So what else do you like to say to end this interview?
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I really love the concept of future hackers. I really believe that is the approach we need for the future. We need to look at our future as a potential way of hacking it for the better. And even though we are living in this moment of the pandemic and people are talking apocalypse, my final word will be we cannot forget that actually it has never been a better moment in time of history to be human beings, and that when we look at the future is always good news for human beings. And if we look at the percentage of people that are having okay lives today, this percentage has never been as elevated as it is today. So I think that really when we're looking at the present and the future, we need to always remember that things are going in the right direction for the humans. And now we need to maybe focus and make it going in the right direction for the planet as a whole. So I think that will be my final thoughts. And for all of you future hackers listeners, hacking the future begins today, I would say, and let's all do that together. Let's hack this fucking future. Thank you.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.